I mean, often when we go hiking, I'm struck by people that are like having loud conversations in the woods on the trail, because I do feel like most connected when I'm experiencing, I am this insignificant little speck in this much larger universe that is just operating on its own in amazing ways.
This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. I'm Drew Dixon. I am the chief content nerd of Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined by Chris Waltney. Hey, Chris.
Hey, I'm Chris, and I'm the chief executive nerd for Love Thy Nerd, and yeah, we're glad you're here to listen to our podcast where we have designers and developers and people in the games industry to talk about the thing they made, but more importantly, to hear about who they are as people and how that informs the things they make. So super glad you're here. We hope you enjoy what you're hearing.
Yeah, for sure. We have a really cool guest on for this episode who is like, kind of like this is probably the wrong word, but like an overnight success story in the board gaming space. Like someone who no one's heard of in the world of board games, and then all of a sudden everybody knows who she is. If you're really into board games, you know what Wingspan is. You probably even tried to get a copy for a long time and couldn't get one because it was so popular. So it's one of the most beautiful games on the market right now. Certainly one of the most loved in this current stage of board gaming. For sure.
Well, it even won Game of the Year, right? At Spiel.
Yeah.
Last year? 2019, yeah.
I think that's right, yeah. Yeah, we should have talked about that. That's pretty wild to have that be your first board game.
Totally.
And, yeah. So
it's a really good chat. And it's cool, too, because, you know, we're still continuing on in this season of the podcast where we want to have women on as guests specifically to highlight women that are doing really cool stuff in the industry. And Elizabeth is definitely one of those people, and we got to have a really good chat. And then
did we say her full name, by the way?
Yeah,
it's Elizabeth Hargrave.
I mean, it's probably in the title, so if you didn't guess by now. But the other cool thing too that I thought was really interesting was, you know, the conversation we get into in the second half of the show, which is about her upbringing as a Unitarian Universalist, which I'm always super intrigued about people that grew up differently than me, and I just never thought that people grew up in that sort of denomination because I thought it was really new, but she informs us otherwise.
What do you know?
Yeah, barely anything, clearly.
Richard Rouse III, we had on the podcast once, who made The Church in the Darkness.
Yep.
He talked about his wife being Unitarian Universalist.
I remember that,
but he's not. So this is the first person that's like, you know, really into that, that we've talked to. And that was interesting. There's a lot I didn't know about Unitarian Universalists that I learned. But yeah, tell us about some new stuff going on at Love Thy Nerd.
Yeah, so we have just in the last, few weeks really been pumping a lot of content into our YouTube channel. That was actually, we had a kind of a planning retreat at the beginning of the year and decided one of the things we really wanted to focus on this year was our YouTube channel and really starting to pump some content there. And lo and behold, coronavirus happens and makes it even more of a necessity for us to be putting out content online just to keep everybody connected and all that good stuff. So please go check out our YouTube channel. It's just YouTube, search Love Thy Nerd, and you'll find us. We've got lots of different video series on there. Drew actually has some different interviews and things like that are popping up from PAX East. So you can go check those out.
Interviews with game designers, kind of like almost like this podcast, but just in a quick,
way shorter,
form.
Yeah. So go check some of that stuff out because we're putting out some good things there.
We're getting some Beard Bros going. We're getting some Co-optional going. So if you were into those shows, we're gonna have some of those on YouTube for you.
Yeah.
And I know also, like, it's just a weird, frustrating, anxious, like, scary time to be alive during the coronavirus. And so I also, Bubba has helped me put together some, like, kind of devotional type videos. We just did the first one recently, so that's a new thing too. It's just me, basically, me on a camera trying to be an old Pastor Drew, trying to give some people some hope. So it's one of the more, like, Jesus-y things that we've done for Love Thy Nerd. So I think, you know, if you're a Christian, you're listening to this, would probably encourage you. If you're not, you might still find it, like, curious at least. But yeah, we all need some grounding, some things to keep us hopeful right now, and that's the goal. So
yeah, you did a great job of that, by the way.
It's called, like, I just forgot what it's called. Devos on Demand.
Devos on Demand.
And by the way, like, all these things that we're doing on YouTube and on our website, and like this podcast, you know, Beard Bros, Co-optional, Free Play, the pull list, the website, like, all these things, the work that we do at conventions that we're hoping and praying will be, you know, be something we can get back to before too long, you know, when coronavirus hopefully passes. All these things require investment. Like, we need money to do all these things. None of these things are free. They all cost us time and energy and money. And so would you think about partnering with us? Just go to lovethynerd.com/partner and consider helping us out to do these things. And if you do, you can be a part of a free, it's not free because you have to pay. You have to donate to Love Thy Nerd. You have to do a recurring donation to be a part of this private Facebook group where you kind of get to see some of the inner workings of what we do at Love Thy Nerd. And also just the people in that group are all really rad. And so it's a way to sort of, like, I don't know, be more connected to us.
A little extended family.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you dig what we do, just think about proving it by helping us out. But seriously, like, we know this is a hard time for a lot of people financially. So we get that there are lots of ways you're thinking about, you know, saving and all that kind of stuff. But you know, honestly, like, we don't know how this is going to affect Love Thy Nerd. We rely on donations. So, just, I guess, keep that in mind.
We'll see.
That was a great commercial.
Yeah, we're really good at this. I don't know if you guys knew.
Yeah. No.
I mean, I figure if they're still listening after all this time, they must think we're good at it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, well, listen for yourself. We got Elizabeth Hargrave coming up.
Yeah, whether or not you appreciate anything we just said, I know you'll appreciate hearing from a really cool game designer.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Gaming. All right, we're not even going to do that.
What in the world, Drew? I mean, you blew it.
Well, I just said that we weren't going to do that.
Blew it.
I know.
We'll just leave this in. I think it's great.
So, Chris is here with me, and also Elizabeth Hargrave. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi.
How's the quarantine life for you right now?
A little lonely. I'm here with my husband. It's beautiful spring here in DC, so we're trying to get outside a lot and take advantage of the beautiful spring days, but everyone else seems to have the same idea, so we're having to get creative about places to go. Right. Yeah. You can not be getting, squished up against people on the trail all the time.
You guys normally like pretty outdoorsy and like to be outside a lot?
Yeah, definitely. And spring migration is starting up for the birds, so this time of year especially, we're like out looking for all the warblers that are only here during migration season, that like they spend the winter south of here and they spend the summer north of here, and so like this is our chance to see them right now.
So you've just played your hand on what we suspected, and so you must be a fan of birds.
How'd you guess?
Why would that
I just had a hunch, but I wasn't 100% sure. I was like 99. So, but you tipped it over. So, that's cool. So you guys, has that something you and your husband have shared for a while, or where did that love of birds come from?
Yeah, he got hooked a little bit before I did, and then I mean, we were always very outdoorsy, and that was kind of part of how we bonded in the first place. Like one of our first dates was going hiking. But
Where did you go hike? I'm curious.
Harper's Ferry, which is like out on the West Virginia, Maryland border, kind of. It's where John Brown staged his raid on the arsenal and during the Civil War or before the Civil War. I don't know my history well enough about like yeah. So there's like a national park there, and then the C&O Canal and the Potomac River go through there, and so it's a beautiful, beautiful spot.
So your husband was into bird watching before you, and he kind of introduced you to the hobby?
Yeah, or I would tag along some, but he was really learning the birds before I got totally hooked by it. And then we went on a vacation to Costa Rica, and I was hooked for sure. They have amazing birds down there.
What is it that you love about bird watching? Like, what draws you to keep up with it?
You know, a lot of people ask me that, and I find it really hard to articulate. I mean, birds are just amazing. And like, I don't know, everyone likes watching animals in general, right? Like, I think we find animals appealing. They're just cool creatures, and birds are really pretty and have their
I'm a dog watcher.
Right. They're, we all like the cute animal videos, and birds are like doing amazing things all the time just outside where you can go find them. You don't have to watch a video online. And they're pretty, and they have pretty songs, and I don't know, what's not to like?
Hey, I think you did a great job articulating that answer.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to go any deeper than that. That's great. So you live in the DC area. How's DC doing in terms of the coronavirus?
A lot of people are saying our numbers are like that we are right on the cusp of either becoming the next New York, or if social distancing works, like dodging the bullet. We're like a couple weeks behind them and maybe have enough warning. I'm in the Maryland suburbs of DC, and the Maryland governor has been pretty aggressive in terms of like we were one of the first state, not very first, but like in the first wave of states to shut the schools and send people home. So I feel good about that. Everyone I know has been very strict about social distancing, but I know my friend group very easily could just be a little bubble. So
I live in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and supposedly what they're saying here is that the peak is going to be like April 15th, and they're suspecting that it'll start like going down from there. So, but we'll see. There's so much that's unknown until you like get to that point.
Right. There's such a lag.
I think most people are. Yeah, very true. And there's definitely like people here who are not taking it seriously because I think there's that whole like, I don't know, like Southern kind of independent. You're not going to tell me how to live my life kind of vibe with some people.
Yeah.
But I do think most people are like, I don't think it helps. I'm trying to keep a positive attitude because I don't think it helps to be like, I don't know, just down in the dumps about the people that do that. And to just hold on to hope. That's what I'm trying to do, is to hope that enough of us are taking it seriously, which I do think is true, that it's making a difference. So.
There was a very interesting map in the New York Times, I think it was today, that was based on cell phone data, like movement data. So it was like hot spots of where have people stopped moving around compared to their normal level of moving around. And like the northeast corner and the west coast of the country are like much, much less movement than normal. And then there's this wave through the southeast and then like the western plains states that's like pretty much business as usual in terms of the
Degas.
and it's really scary.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is really scary. Yeah.
Hey, West Coast
Thankfully, I can-
represent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I can say that at least that's not true in Nashville. Just about everything here is shut down. So, we are trying to get out though, like you are, just to the parks and stuff. But even then, it's like there's some of those are kind of getting overwhelmed because it feels like one of the few things people can do to get out of their house. It's a weird thing because it's like we all are trying to do our part, but at the same time, you can't just stay in your house forever, and you'll go crazy.
I beg to differ.
We've all got to get some fresh air.
Right. So,
Chris might be able
we
to.
have a shutdown order in Maryland now. Like we are supposed to be stay at home order, right? But there's an exception for exercise. Like that you can't make people literally stay in their house all the time.
Well, we definitely don't want this to be like the coronavirus update podcast.
Right. A few weeks from now, it'll all be out of date again.
Yeah, I hope so. But we do hope that this podcast brings some people some joy in the midst of this time. I know it's frustrating, to say the least, for a lot of people. It's anxious for a lot of us. A lot of us are feeling a lot of anxiety. So we hope that these conversations, give people some perspective and some joy, I guess. I don't know. Perspective is probably the wrong word, but some joy in the midst of this. So yeah, tell us about like how you got into making board games.
I had been playing hobby board games for probably 10 years before I started designing, and I was starting.
What's your jam? Like, what type of board games are you into?
I would say like mid-weight Euros. Yeah, but I'll do a good party game. I find it difficult to find the time and the people to play like really heavy stuff. Although I have a couple friends actually since the coronavirus whole, like the people that I normally playtest with on Wednesdays, a couple of them we've been getting together online to play like some of the heavier classic games that we haven't played in a long time and like really think about why they've stuck around and like what makes them tick. So that's been really fun and
like which games?
Engrossing. So yesterday we just played Terra Mystica.
Oh yeah. I've never played that, but I love Gaia Project.
Yeah, and so that's like a little longer and heavier than the games that I'm usually able to get to the table. And I enjoy the crunch, but I just don't get to do it that often. So like my sweet spot in terms of what I actually play is like a little like, like Wingspan weight Euros. So yes, I've been playing games for like since 2005-ish, and I don't know, like 5 years ago, I started really like being dissatisfied with the themes of a lot of games that I had been playing and like enjoying the mechanics and the process of playing, but just being uninspired by like castles and trading in the Mediterranean and all the tropes that we see. And so actually I had a conversation with some friends with my husband. Yeah, I don't know exactly. It just seems like a really disproportionate number of the board games. Like at one point my friends and I actually had a moratorium on like buying any new castle games. Castles of Mad King Ludwig broke the moratorium, but like right before that came out, we were just like, why all the castles? No more. So yeah, it really came like out of theme and dissatisfaction with theme and like thinking about what would a game look like that was about something that I was actually into.
So how do you get over the hump of like, because I'm just curious, because a lot of people think about making games, I think, especially people who are really into board games.
Yeah.
So how do you get over the hump of being like, I'm a fan of this hobby, to going like, I'm going to make a game?
I got to the point where my brain wouldn't let it go and I kept thinking about it, and I just at one point made like some handwritten cards to see how something would work, where you had birds as the theme and the different things that birds eat as their resources, and like how would it even work. And so I just like played against myself a bunch until I had something that kind of worked, and then I played with some of my friends and my husband, and then eventually got it to the point that I was willing to show it to people in the outside world, and got hooked into Unpub, which is a big playtesting con up in Baltimore, and and the local design scene here in the DC area. There's a bunch of people between DC and Baltimore. So there's like a monthly playtesting event at one of the local board game cafes here in Maryland, and some other like invite only things at people's houses. And so once I got kind of hooked into that community, it really started moving forward more, because I think playtesting with other designers, you learn so much, and people really can help you think through like what isn't working and why isn't it working, and what are things you can try to fix it in a way that just playtesting with your friends, you don't really necessarily get that level of insight. You might have a gem of a friend that thinks really critically about how board games work, but a lot of people just play games and don't think about it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But when you can find other folks that really want to think about like how all the pieces fit together, it's just priceless.
That's really interesting, because I do think that those people are rare gems, because I'm not that person. Like, I've had friends that like want to play test games, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it. And I just want to play it one time and give you a bunch of feedback, and then never play it again until you've finished it.
Right.
But like, I think there's those people.
Yeah, my husband playtested Wingspan a lot in the early stages, but then he got to the point of like, he just can't stand it that the rules change every time he plays, right?
Yeah.
And like,
that would be frustrating now that I think about it.
It's like, wait. So now I really like every once in a while he'll play something just to see what I'm working on, but I try not to call on him as a playtester because it just burns him out.
Yeah,
that's fine. I think
there's a risk of doing that with any friends too. Like there's a quid pro quo when you're playing with other designers that you're going to also playtest their games, so they're happy to play yours. But if you're just like imposing on your friends to play something over and over, that's just not sustainable.
But it's like pretty important, I would think, because when you playtest with designers, you're going to get probably feedback from people who play games and think about them a lot, and kind of, but you need that feedback from people who are like less into that kind of thing. How's this going to sit with like the average person,
the lay person? Well, I think Wingspan even a little more so, because Wingspan is, I mean, I think it's a gateway game for a lot of people, you know? So you almost need that kind of feedback.
But it's like not actually gateway weight.
Right, yeah. I think that's the brilliance of it, honestly.
Game should be. But yeah, and there's also a risk of like, if you're playtesting with the same people over and over, then they get really used to how a game works, and they can drive you to make it heavier and heavier, like heavier than you want it to be, because it feels easy to them because they've played it a lot.
That's interesting. How do you hold on to it's so interesting to me, like when I've had friends that are, you know, making games and stuff like that. And I have a close friend who we play games every week, and he's kind of in this process of making a game. And like, how do you hold on to that original vision in such a way that you don't lose it, or you don't add too many bits and bobs, or you don't remove the soul of what you're originally trying to get at? Like, that's just fascinating to me how you would do that.
Yeah, I mean, I try now to actually like sit down and articulate sort of a vision of who I want my audience to be, and like what I want the game to feel like for them, and what story I'm trying to tell with the game. Those sorts of things. I have like a little sheet for each game before I start it. And sometimes I fill one out just with a game idea to like file for later, and I haven't gone back and actually like made the game, but it's like, this is what this game would be like if I ever get to it. But and you know, it's okay for some of those things to change if you start working on something and it gets heavier, and you decide, okay, this is actually a heavier game for a different audience than I thought I was originally going for, or in the other direction. Like, no, really, like the thing that works here is this simple little thing, and that's just a sweet little simple game on its own. Like, it's okay to change your mind about what your vision for the game is, but if you can articulate your vision ahead of time to the extent that like you aren't getting strong signals that you need to change that vision, then that gives you a way, like as you're making decisions about how to fix problems or what, you know, what even is working and isn't working in a game, then that gives you something like, this is a game for people that are going to be playing it with their families, and you know, whatever your vision is, like a lot of times the answers to how to fix something can come directly out of that sort of vision statement.
So what was that like? How many iterations do you think? Just curious, like that Wingspan went through before it went to the printer.
I lost track. I mean, I worked on it for probably 3 years before I pitched it to Stonemeyer, and then I worked on it with Jamie for another year after that. So a lot of iterations.
More than 3.
I mean, often I would change something after most playtests, right? Like a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Weekly for 4 years. Not really. There were times, especially early on, that you know, I wouldn't work on it for a month or 2 at a time sometimes. And so I literally have no idea how many iterations it went through, but even like major shifts, like dozens.
So what's that process been like for you? Do you have to like learn to let go of ideas? And I'm sure there's things that you just like really wanted into the game, but then just had to give up on because of playtesting and realizing like this needs to change. Do you handle that well? What have you learned from that? I'm curious.
I think so. That I do handle it well. In the sense that like, I mean, early on, did I? I don't know. I think it's a learned skill to even put something out in front of people like that. At the beginning is the hardest part, not the changing it, just the like letting other people see it and feeling like they might think you're an idiot, but putting it in front of them anyway. Like, that's a huge learned skill. And then once you get over that hurdle, I don't know. I do a lot of running focus groups for a living as my day job. Although I've stopped doing a lot of consulting because I've been doing more game stuff.
Like focus groups for products, for
more
kind of
for on Medicare policy. So I with a lot of Medicare beneficiaries and physicians and different groups that are affected by government healthcare programs. And so like I feel like that still
DNA
makes me able to just like to like listen to what people are saying and to like think critically about what they're saying in terms of like what are they really saying and what's the next question to ask them based on what they just said and that kind of stuff. And so I feel like that background maybe give me a leg up on the like taking in feedback and processing it and not taking it so personally. And I didn't have a ton of darlings within the process of Wingspan. I feel like mostly I just like I listen to what playtesters are saying and I'm willing to try most suggestions once unless I can sort of already foresee how it's not going to work.
What was the experience, or how's the experience been of finally publishing a game, especially one that like has done really well? What's that experience been like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, so far beyond anything that I expected, right? Because just, I mean, a lot of the advice that you hear in the sort of how to get your board games published is like, if your first game sells 5,000 copies, you're doing well as a first-time designer. Like that's sort of the expectation bar that a lot of people set. And a lot of first-time games don't even sell that, and that's fine too. But like, you've gotten your game out in the world, and that in and of itself, so just like putting your game out there is a very exciting feeling. And then like,
and you were like prepared for that potentially, like for it to sell like a few thousand copies, and you would have been okay with that?
I would have been thrilled. Yeah. And so then like a month before he announced Wingspan, I heard an interview with JB Stegmaier, because he hadn't told me how many copies he was going to print, where he just happened to mention in passing that like his minimum print runs for his games are 10,000 copies. I was like, oh, okay. That's more than I was expecting. I just hadn't even like asked him yet.
There's going to be a lot on the shelf.
Yeah, right.
I store a lot in my garage.
No, but Stonemaier Games has such a following, and it was a real blessing to hook up with them, and then for Wingspan to take off and like do even better than just that base of the Stonemaier following has just been amazing and so fun to see everyone playing it, and to there's this whole Facebook group community of people that are playing it and posting pictures, and like that whole side, which is just amazing to see, and getting to meet people at Gen Con. Like I spent 4 days at Gen Con with people just like coming up to the booth all day wanting to meet me, and that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like you make a game that's so beloved like this, that people like really dig. And it's been you couldn't get a copy for a long time.
Right.
It was so so sought after.
Pretty much every print run last year sold out within a few weeks. Yeah. And now it's sold like 300 something thousand copies.
Oh my gosh, that's
I was going to
incredible.
ask you how many. Man. Yeah. Hey, congrats.
Thanks.
So you did a little bit better than your 5,000 goal. That's awesome. I forgot what I was going to say. Something with regard to that. So you go to a place like Gen Con, and like you're almost like a celebrity there. What's that like, going to Gen Con and having people be like, sign my game, and oh my gosh, you're the person that made this thing that I love.
It's an interesting kind of celebrity because it's like only within context, right? Like I wouldn't get stopped in the aisles of the exhibit hall, but if I was at the booth and people like put it together who I was, even though I was wearing a Wingspan t-shirt all day, but like at
I was
the
wearing
booth,
a t-shirt that said I'm Elizabeth Hargrave. Why weren't people stopping me?
But it's not like paparazzi level celebrity, and it certainly outside of the board game world, like no one has any idea. So it's very interesting, and like you can really turn it on and off, which is nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, we want to hear about like you and where you come from and how that's shaped you and the work that you do and all that kind of stuff. So, did you grow up in the DC area, or where did you grow up?
No, I actually spent the year that I was in second grade, we lived in DC because my dad was doing a sabbatical at the National Institutes of Health. Okay. But so I had like fond childhood memories of DC, but in this like special year kind of way. But I went to elementary school in Southern Illinois, and then we moved to Florida, North Florida, when I was in middle school.
What part of Florida?
Gainesville, where the University of Florida is.
Okay. So your dad was a physician?
Biochemist.
And your mom, she around?
Yeah, she went to law school at the University of Florida when we moved to Gainesville and became a lawyer. She was she taught environmental science actually before that.
Oh, they're a real power couple.
So I come by it honestly, my outdoorsiness. It's a family hobby.
Yeah. And so I guess was their professions that influenced you to get into like what you did with like you said you do focus groups for Medicaid stuff, or how did that?
I don't know that their professions influenced me, not consciously, but I went to graduate school in public policy. I actually started out as a religious studies major in college, but switched to public policy because I kind of realized like I wanted to have a more concrete like impact on changing. You wanted to actually help people. Yeah, more like I don't know. less emotionally and more practically.
I can see that.
And I also realized like that I would be terrible at actually like being the head of a congregation or something. I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and so like the one
cool.
vision I had at one point was being a UU minister, but like I am not even I feel like I'm not enough of an extrovert to actually like be a good pastor.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
yeah,
a bit of a misnomer, though.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what it felt like to me when I was like wrestling with this in my
I can totally see how
Right.
it would feel that way.
Right.
Certainly a lot of the way we think someone not to be a pastor feels very extroverted.
Right.
But I know some really good ones that are
Sure.
So
right, because it also takes a certain amount of like self-reflection and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so anyway, so I went to graduate school for public policy straight out of college, and because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, or like had made this shift in what I thought I wanted to do, and got really interested in healthcare policy specifically while I was in graduate school. So I was doing a lot around poverty and a lot around healthcare and sort of how those two interact, because healthcare disparities are such a result of poverty and vice versa.
Those problems aren't going away anytime soon right now. So
I don't know. I keep wondering whether like super high unemployment as a result of COVID, if it could result in people being able to pivot to argue for universal health care, but it's still a heavy lift.
It's going to be wild to see how things change after this, for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so rewinding a bit, because I'm really interested, like growing up Unitarian Universalist, and what was that like? Because I feel like my perception is that it's a relatively newer, would you call it a denomination, or I don't know what you would call it.
It's a denomination. So it came out of...
And so the idea of somebody growing up that way, like that's foreign to me. I think of it as like it's this newer thing that people join as adults or whatever, you know?
Right. And a lot of people do. And I mean, it has roots in like the 1850s religious revivals. There were Unitarians and there were Universalists. And the Unitarians were like the Ralph Waldo Emerson Thoreau New Englanders, and the Universalists were like some of so Unitarians were like Jesus is not the literal Son of God, but still believed in a lot of other Christian traditions, just like the whole like literally like, their problem was with the concept of the Trinity, and then the Universalists still believed in the Trinity but didn't believe in the concept of hell, like that a good God would not send you to hell. And over the course of their evolution, those two denominations ended up becoming more and more similar in their theology, and they ended up merging in the 1960s. And so, like, my mom's family was actually Unitarians going way back. They were in New Hampshire. And so, like, her family, generations of Unitarians and then Unitarian Universalists. But yeah, so now as a denomination, you'll find a lot of people who are straight up atheists, probably in the majority even, and you find a lot of people who find the denomination as adults, like you said. But there's people that grow up in it too, and you find a lot of people who are like seeking connection or spirituality or something that's not as dogmatic as what they grew up with.
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's like this list of principles, and one of them is like we believe in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, right? Like just broadly that process is a valuable process, but that it's okay for people to end up in different places as a result of that process.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your parents were doing that as you were growing up. What did that look like? You go on Sunday, or what, how do
Yep.
you?
Yep. So
What is like the practice of a Unitarian Universalist?
yeah, it's pretty, I don't know. Do I want to say it's a typical church service? It's like, it's a church service. You go to church.
Yeah.
And there's usually like meditative prayer like stuff going on to center people, but often not. Depending on the minister, it may or may not invoke God. Usually, like one of the hymns that my church growing up sang every week was called Spirit of Life. So it was like this more encompassing, like you can call it God, or you can just sort of think more generally of like life as something that you want to invoke as like a centering thing to connect to. Yeah, and then there's a sermon by the minister. It's often, something about how you want to live your life, or how to be a good person, how to survive hardship, how to, the things that people are seeking in any sermon, but without drawing necessarily on Christian scriptures to come up with answers. So drawing much more on literature or poetry or philosophy, instead of just saying like someone wrote this in a book that we believe is inherently true and therefore this is the answer. Like a lot more questioning about what are different ways that different faiths have treated this subject. And in the Sunday school, one of the curricula, like every few years, they'll do several grades at once, where all the kids like study the world religions and go to church services and other denominational services from as many religions as you can find in your local community. So like,
I think that's incredible. Like,
yeah,
all
it was
churches should be
incredible.
doing that. Like,
and it really reinforces that feeling of like, there isn't one truth. Like people find many different truths, and they're all meaningful to the people that practice that religion. And like, you can't just dismiss it. That is truth to the people that observe that practice. And like finding the good in any of them.
So, I mean, growing up in, you said North Florida, which is, I mean, people classified that as the South, right? Is that still, I mean, would people classify that like Bible Belt South?
Gainesville is a college town. And then once you get, out into the countryside around Gainesville, you're in like deep South. North Florida is very different. Like if your picture of Florida is South Florida, like Orlando or Miami, North Florida is 100% different culturally.
Well, yeah, I guess I would picture it more like conservative, evangelical kind of stuff.
Yeah, we were an hour from the Georgia border. So yeah. But within Gainesville,
so I guess my question, like, I mean,
town, not so much.
being in that Unitarian Universalist camp, like, what were the interactions like with, I don't know, was it hard? I would just imagine it being hard in that kind of environment, because I think most evangelicals think of Unitarian Universalists as just satanic people destined for hell.
Right.
So
I didn't
like,
get
was that
in
a
Gainesville.
thing?
Like that wasn't the people that I knew in Gainesville. I got that in Southern Illinois before we moved. We were in a much smaller town, and I had classmates tell me I was going to hell. And it was very confusing as like a third grader to be told that.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember my dad's
That's where
family
you
was
just say, well,
Christian,
joke's on you because there isn't a hell.
Right. So like my grandpa at one point gave me a Bible, and I would like read the Bible in secret. I was like trying to figure out what all these people were trying to tell me about. And like the Bible does not make sense when you're in third grade.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense when you're 34.
Right. Right.
But maybe you're just reading it wrong or something.
Yeah, that's right. It's your fault.
So your grandparents were like Christians, or
yeah,
what?
my dad was kind of a black sheep in his family, but for many reasons, not only religion, like the whole culture of, they were mainstream, like Presbyterians.
What did your, like, so did your people in your family then, your extended family, like kind of worry about you because of your family being Unitarian?
I don't know. We didn't have that kind of relationship with my dad's family. They just didn't comment on it. I don't know.
Yeah.
We would see them. We didn't get into it with them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So where did you land with all this? Like you were into it when you were growing up. Do you still think of yourself as like Unitarian Universalist? Do you still practice, or where'd you land now?
Yeah, when we moved to where I live now, about 10 years ago, we moved far enough away from the church we had been going to in DC, which is like a mother church. It's a huge, huge congregation. People like within Unitarianism have heard about it. It's super active in the civil rights movement and is actually more like multiracial, multicultural than a lot of Unitarian churches. It was an amazing congregation, but it's like just enough of a trip on Sunday morning that I don't make it down there very often. And so there's a congregation that's closer to me that I just haven't totally connected to up here yet. And I keep saying I'm going to, but it's hard, man.
It's hard. It is so hard.
And my husband doesn't have the same connection that I do. So he's even less interested in going. And so then that's like even more unmotivating to me. I have to not only get up and be motivated, but like be motivated to not do something with my partner on Sunday morning.
Sure.
Instead of like having a nice breakfast and going hiking or whatever. So yeah, I just probably last time I went to the service was maybe a year or two ago.
Do you find, outside of, attending the church service and that kind of stuff, like just daily life things, like, do you still find there's practices that, from childhood or your life that you're still doing? Like you mentioned earlier, meditative prayer or contemplative prayer stuff. Like, are there things like that are still sort of part of what you're doing?
That's a good question. I do sort of go in and out of having a meditation practice. It's something that I constantly like have to get back on the wagon about. I don't know why that is. I think again, it's like it's something I have to carve out of my schedule and like actively distance myself from my partner to do it. I haven't found like a time in the day when it's just like easy to not be interrupted and to be motivated.
Our lives aren't set up for it by default, for sure. Like smartphones and just the constant accessibility that we have, where I feel like meditation or that kind of thing is like,
Right. My husband and I both work at home. So like we're both just always around. And I think there's something about that too that makes it harder.
Do you find, being that you guys are super into being outside and nature and that kind of stuff, like, is there anything that you connect with spiritually, like just being outside? Is that a big deal for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's part of it too, is that to a certain extent that fills the same hole for me. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah. I mean, often when we go hiking, we're not chatting. I'm often really like struck by people that are like having loud conversations in the woods on the trail because it's just like not my thing. Like we just go and experience it. And I do feel like most connected when I'm out there, just experiencing that feeling that like the world is much larger than me. Like I am this insignificant little speck in this much larger universe that is just like operating on its own in amazing ways.
So do you think that came out of, would you say that came out of your upbringing, or where did that kind of sense of like wonder about the world and stuff, where did that come from for you?
I don't know. Probably. I do think that that's like, yeah, that is a theme that you will find in Unitarian churches for sure. That sense that like, even if you don't believe in God, there is something, everyone has that craving to feel like there's something larger than you that you can connect to. And so in congregations where like you can usually assume that at least half of your congregants are like actively do not believe in God, like not even questioning, and the other half are probably actively questioning, that is something that I think gives a lot of Unitarian congregants that feeling of connection. So one of the principles and purposes of Unitarian Universalism, I can recite some of them literally, and one of them is that we are what is it? A belief in the interconnected web of which we all are a part, or something like that. That's close to what it is.
So what is that for you? Like that thing that's bigger than yourself that motivates you?
Yeah, it's that interconnected web of like all of nature and everything. And it doesn't have to have been created by a conscious force to be amazing. It just is.
So did your husband grow up like religious at all?
He grew up Jewish. He got bar mitzvahed, but his family wasn't.
He got bar mitzvahed. I've never heard that before.
He was bar mitzvahed. Like he went through the whole process of like going to Hebrew school and all that, but then he was the youngest of 3 kids, and once he finished his whole process, after that his family pretty much only went to services for high holidays. Like they weren't super religious, but they wanted to give their kids, I think, the cultural heritage of it as much as or more than the religion. And so going through that process was very important to them. And we still, we'll do something for Passover. But it's not, certainly spiritually, it's not a big part of his life.
It's kind of a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I guess that he holds on to.
Like especially, I really appreciate doing Passover, I think, more than he does, and like remembering the stories and sort of the message of liberation from oppression. And
it's a cool, like the Passover meal is, it's really neat. Like just the symbolism and all that stuff, I think can be really special.
Yeah. But like, so his family used to use the order of service for a Passover Seder is called the Haggadah, and his family had this Haggadah that was like, I don't know, put out by Maxwell House or something, I forget, some coffee company, which apparently was super widespread, like in the 60s, and it's this super conservative, like, version of the story. I mean, it's very traditional. It's like the angry smiting God just has it in for the Pharaoh, and like there's lots of death and destruction and smiting going on. And no one in his family actively liked this Haggadah. They just had never looked for anything else. And I started going to their Passovers and was like horrified. It's just like, there's not a lot about like, I grew up, like Unitarians often like pull in all these other holidays, right? So I had grown up doing some Passover Seders occasionally, or at least learning the Passover story as like this super lefty liberation story. And so like, I think my third Passover with his family, I was like, can I find us a different Haggadah? Can we not do that one this year?
How did that go over?
Yes, please. No, they loved it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Isn't that so interesting though? Because I think that paints just almost the perfect picture of like how some people do traditions and stuff, where it's just
Yeah.
like, this is it. This is the way we've always done it. We don't think about it. We just do it.
Right.
And this is the way, you know?
Right. Right. And his parents, his dad's parents, spoke Yiddish. Like they were much more, and kept kosher. And then his dad was, much more, sort of cultural American Jew, super rational scientist guy himself. And so like, yeah, I think he had never stepped back and thought about what the other options were.
But you found a good one for him?
I did. I kind of combined a couple, actually. I got into it. And I do think it's my upbringing too, that like you're totally allowed to mix and match and just play with stuff,
But that's cool, because I think maybe you brought an extra, you spiced it up for him a little bit, and maybe hopefully helped them, I don't know, maybe reignited something for them with that tradition.
There were definitely, in the old Haggadah whole sections that they were like, do we have to read this page? And their mom would be like, no, we're skipping this page. Like skip. All right.
So funny.
What do we have to do?
I'm curious about like where you see yourself in the work that you do, like Wingspan, for instance, in that great interconnected web. Like, what part does it play in the work, the work that you do?
That's a good question.
Don't
I
blow
would
it.
joke sometimes when I was working on it, that I wanted to get birders into gaming, and I wanted to get gamers into birding.
Yeah.
Which has happened to a certain extent. There's definitely people who will post occasionally in the Facebook group that started out as gamers who are now like, how do I get started actually birding? Or like, look at the birds in my backyard.
Yeah.
These are on the team, that kind of thing. So that's super fun. So yeah, I guess that was my main thing, was just like providing another point of connection for people that maybe haven't thought about birds before, but like, hey, these are really cool. Check them out.
Well, it certainly is a game. It certainly is a beautiful game, and it certainly is a game that makes me think more about like the world around me. Like to celebrate this marvelous, intricate world that we live in. I think that way about Parks too. Your game and then Parks.
Yeah.
Those are two games that make me want to just like get outside more, which I already love to do. But I just, if anything, like prods me to do that further. I have tend to have a deeper affection for it. So
There's really something wonderful about games that I think not only are like beautiful themselves, but point to things that are beautiful. And I think there's something too about Wingspan that like, I don't even know why. I couldn't tell you why or articulate it, but it does just make you slow down. I don't know why. I don't know if that's a mechanic that's built into it or just how it looks, the art, the components, whatever it is about it, the theme. But for someone like me who, like, I'm a pretty deep strategy gamer. Like Twilight Imperium is my favorite board game. So like I have no problem like digging in head down, strategizing for hours on end. But there's something about the times that I played Wingspan where it pulls me out of that and slows me down and just feels restful or something,
Yeah, a lot of the early reviews were like, this game is really peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Was that intentional? Like, did that, I think a lot of creators and designers, people we talk to, there's like these things when their game comes out that they didn't intend and it was just like a happy little accident. Yeah. Thanks, Bob Ross. Like, was that, yeah.
I think part of it's my personal play style. Like, there's not a lot of there's no take that in it, right? There's no way to really attack other players. It's like, I'm one of those people that I'm like, sign me up for the multiplayer solitaire games. Like, that's my jam. Some people use it as a criticism of games, and I'm like, no, that's awesome. And then there's like little bits of interaction around the goals and things, and just, but I'm perfectly happy just like trying to do my best while everyone else is trying to do their best, and then you see who actually did best. So I think that's part of it, just that you can't attack other people. And I think the art contributes to that feeling.
For sure.
And
yeah,
I don't know. It wasn't super my intention, but in playtesting, there were definitely times that I would try things and be like, yeah, that just doesn't fit with birds. Like the feeling that you would be watching birds is. I didn't want things that felt like really contrary to that.
It's definitely one of the most beautiful games out on the market today.
Yeah, they really knocked the art out of the park and spent so much time on it. I mean, to do all those individual bird illustrations, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And what an opportunity for those artists, too. Like, they were just, like, to get this commission to do 170 birds. And now we've done the Europe expansion with another 80. They're working on the Australia Oceania expansion, which is another however many, and yeah, they just keep going. It's awesome.
Just keep going till you get all the birds.
Yeah, we've said we want to do one per continent.
There you go.
So
I mean, even if you get like all the birds eventually,
right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
you could do like prehistoric birds.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Somebody told me to ask about the pterodactyls.
Once I get through all the continents, I will think about whether that makes sense.
Well, we're excited. So, what are you? You got the new expansion coming out. What can you tell us about that?
Not a lot, because Stonemeyer likes to be super secretive. But he, so it was actually unusual that we even announced what continent it was going to be. But Jamie wanted to do a fundraiser for the wildfires that were earlier this year, which seemed like decades ago now.
I know, doesn't it?
Someone just mentioned that. It was like, those wildfires were only a couple months ago, guys. So Jamie did a big fundraiser that you could sign up, like within a few days, you could sign up for to be notified when the Oceania expansion comes out later this year, and he would donate a certain amount per person who signed up to the wildfire relief fund. And it raised several $1,000s. It was pretty exciting and awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
That.
Well, it's great talking to you. Where can people follow you if they want to just like follow what you're up to?
Yeah, so I have a website that's elizhargrave.com. So ELIZ Hargrave. And I have a little newsletter on there that I send out like once every month or two. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so it's a good place to find me. Also, Eliz Hargrave. And then I try and pop in on the Wingspan Facebook group a fair amount too. So I'll probably see something if you put it there. And yeah.
Well, so great to talk to you, and hope that the rest of your quarantine goes as well as it can.
Thank you. You too.
That's it for us. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.